Hey guys, this is Kathy Newton, licensed clinical social worker from the channel Therapy Rocks, spelled R-O-X. I'm going to be talking today about the optimal arousal zone and hyperarousal and hypoarousal. Now, this original concept of the arousal continuum has been out there for a long time. But I'm going to give credit to Ogden, Minton, and Payne, 2006, for the chart that I'm going to show you today. I'm not sure if I can get it up into the screen here, but I'll be talking about it extensively, so hopefully that'll help. So basically, after trauma, the nervous system remains prepared for danger. So let's say a lion walks in my office right now. I am going to go into fight, flight, freeze, or total submission. So basically fight or flight. Okay, these other two are just extensions of fight. So my brain, my limbic system actually is going to make, my limbic brain is going to make that decision for me. So the thinking part of my brain is not going to make that decision for me. It's a very primitive decision. It's all about safety. It's all about survival. So it's going to be made by the limbic part of my brain. And so I'm going to go into fight or flight. And I can tell you right now, I'm probably not going to, I'm not sure what I would do. We really don't know how we're going to react. But I'm in a small office and either I can get out the door or go through the glass. And so I'm probably going to fight. I'm not sure. But in any event, if I survive this event, my nervous system is going to eventually settle back down into what some people call the optimal arousal zone. Now, this is a place where where our feelings and our reactions are tolerable. We can think and feel simultaneously, and our reactions adapt to fit the situation. Okay, you guys have all heard me talk about the concept of staying big and the concept of getting little. And so this is a place where we can stay big. It's just normal to stay big. It just is a spontaneous reaction. It's something we own. And, if somebody comes into our optimal arousal zone, into our space, we're able to stay big. We're able to react like an adult. And we're actually able to be present. We can notice what's around us. We can be in our bodies. We can notice that, wow, the room is feeling comfortable. I'm sitting on my chair. It feels good. I'm noticing the sounds around me. I'm noticing things in my body, and I'm just able to be calm. I'm able to tolerate that calm place. That's the optimal arousal zone. We all return to that. If you're not a trauma survivor, you return to the optimal arousal zone until the next time the lion comes through the door. Okay, folks who have been traumatized stay either hyper aroused most of the time, so they stay up higher, or hypoaroused. So I'm going to show you just the top part of this chart where you see that hyper-aroused place. Okay, when you're hyper-aroused, you're panicky, you're impulsive, you're defensive, you're angry, your thoughts are racing, you're hyper-alert and hyper-vigilant, and just really, really traumatically stressed out. Now I'm going to move it up a little bit, and hopefully you can see the optimal arousal zone. And that's what I just talked about. And then down lower, you're going to be able to see the hypoaroused place. And you see the little lines going up and down and up and down and up and down this chart. That's because with trauma survivors, they may have a default mode, like most of us have a default mode where we default to it most of the time. Okay, so, my experience, and I don't know statistically if this is true, but my experience is that most people default mode goes into hyperarousal. But I have had a handful of patients who really their default mode is to go into hypoarousal and they just shut down. So it does happen, and I don't know what the frequency really is, but a lot of times people will get hyper aroused go into fight mode, maybe overreact, and then they go down into hypoarousal because they're so overwhelmed. And so you can swing back and forth. And that's why so many times trauma survivors are labeled as bipolar. But it's so very different than bipolar. We'll talk about that some other time. So anyways, that is the optimal arousal zone. When you are in hyperarousal, which is that top area, your sympathetic nervous system is dominant. Okay, and that's a problem. You also have several hormones and chemicals coursing through your body, and I talk about that pickling effect, that when you have that happening from the time that you're a very young child, it's like your system and your neural pathways in your brain and your organs get pickled in adrenaline and cortisol, and other stress hormones. And, all of those hormones play a role in our daily life, but we're not supposed to be flooded with them all the time. So that's a problem. When you are in the optimal arousal zone, your parasympathetic nervous system is dominant. And that's what we want. When you are hypoaroused, the physiological thing that happens to your body is your body actually pumps out the equivalent of about 8 milligrams of morphine. It's like your system is preparing to be injured. And so hyperarousal, hypoarousal both have chemicals that go along with them. And these reactions are primitive. Okay, so give yourself, I say this a lot on these channels, on these videos, give yourself some grace when you go into hyperarousal or hypoarousal, and bad things happen, because the reaction itself is so primitive that it's almost immediate. And so over time, with loading information on the hard drive of your brain, getting as much education as you can about these symptoms, and then starting to notice yourself. Be mindful. Notice when these things happen. You will start to get a grip on and get more control over these primitive reactions so that they're not running the show anymore. That's what we all want. We want to have choice. We want to get reconnected to our will. Trauma disconnects people from their will. Okay. The next few minutes, I just want to say something specifically to Christian survivors. I wanted to do this on every video where it's appropriate, just because some of that information for Christians versus people who aren't Christian might be different, just slightly different. So if you're not interested in that, feel free to just sign off at this point. If you are interested, hang on for just a few seconds. I just want to say something that, something simple. I believe that God lives in the now, okay? He lives in the optimal arousal zone, okay? He doesn't live in the past. He's omnipresent, he's omniscient, and all of those things, yes. But he wants us to live in the present with him. So I always say this to people: if you show up and you work on your healing, God is going to show up and meet you there. He's going to do the supernatural things that you can't do. There are some things we run into in our own healing process that we can't do. One of the things I always tell people is, I can't forgive anyone. I can't change my own heart. I can only make that choice. I can say, okay, Lord, I'm willing to take my hand from off their neck. I am willing to forgive. And that's all I have to do. And that opens the door of my heart, and that lets God begin to do his supernatural work inside of me so that he changes my heart towards that person. So really all I have to do is choose it. And the same goes for love. Forgiveness and love are both choices. Trauma tends to try to disconnect us from our will, where we don't feel like we had a choice. We didn't have choices as kids, okay? We didn't have a choice about much. So God lives in the now. He wants to help you live in the now. And if you show up for your healing, he's going to meet you there and do wonderful supernatural things. He's the God of the supernatural, and he loves you so much. Have a great day. God bless.